begin by introducing our next speaker, which is Craig. And I might invite those who are ready, if you're ready, to also come up because the stairwell is a little narrow. So Craig Simmons is going to follow me. He needs no introduction to many of the members in the audience, but he's professor of mechanical engineering and a distinguished professor of mechanobiology at the University of Toronto and the Institute of Biomedical Engineering. He's a fellow of multiple national and international engineering and biomedical societies, and he's done pioneering work on how biomechanical forces drive heart valve disease and regeneration. And his lab has worked on lab-on-a-chip microtechnologies to model tissues and organs. He's advanced drug discovery, regenerative strategies, and he's an accomplished educator. So, Professor Simmons, thank you.
Thanks, Spencer. Thank you, Sir. And so I have a great pleasure and no small task of summarizing in just a few minutes the last 10 years of innovation in translational cardiovascular science and heart failure research. When I try to do so, as I put up my disclosures, I'm going to try to do so by highlighting some noteworthy advancements over the past decade, starting with a more global perspective, but then followed by the Ted Rogers Center perspective. And when my list is in no way comprehensive, I'm sure I missed a lot, but I hope you agree that it touches on many of the important themes from the past decade and moving forward, and you'll see definitely some overlap with some of Mansour's thoughts. And so as I started to think about where did we start 10 years ago as a center in 2015, and what was emerging at that time was that preclinical models, iPSCs, were really emerging as robust tools for preclinical drug testing and target validation. And those were certainly in that research in that area has certainly been a theme throughout our 10 years at the center. Precision medicine was starting to be realized. Its promise was starting to be realized through advances in genetic testing and multi-omics methods to provide new mechanistic insights, discover new biomarkers, and stratify patients for individualized diagnosis and targeted therapies. And certainly that movement that transition from general to precision has been core to a lot of what we've done in the center. Gene therapy has emerged over the past decade with caution, but as adeno-associated virus-based therapies started moving from animal testing to early clinical trials in the cardiovascular space, enthusiasm has grown. As you heard from Sir, implementation of artificial intelligence and machine learning has really permeated much of translational science. But some of the earliest performance gains in the cardiovascular space have been demonstrated in echocardiography, imaging, ECG interpretation, and risk prediction models. Similarly, digital health tools have kind of everywhere and wearables, and we saw great advances in these technologies over the past decade. Perhaps a milestone was the FDA approving the Apple Watch for AFib detection in late 2018, and we'll hear, I think, from Heather later about continued efforts to validate these technologies for clinical care. And while we could have expected, I think, the digital health revolution, I don't think we could have expected a global pandemic. But what that pandemic did was it really propelled COVID-19 or mRNA vaccines and associated platform technologies forward. And these have now then enabled RNA therapeutics to advance now into cardiovascular indications. CRISPR gene editing we heard about earlier, it's also took great strides over the past decade. Its applications for cardiovascular indications really leapt forward with the demonstration that a single DNA base in the PCSK9 gene could be altered to durably lower LDL cholesterol in non-human primates in the early 2020s, just a couple years ago. This has since supported the initiation of first-in-human clinical trials for familial hypercholesterolemia and opens up new avenues for CRISPR-based gene therapy moving forward. Drug therapies have continued to advance, and perhaps the most talked about are the GLP-1 receptor agonists, which beyond their efficacy to manage type 2 diabetes and obesity, have really shown widespread cardiovascular benefit in recent clinical trials. And regenerative medicine, encapsulating both cardiac cell therapy and tissue engineering, I'd say it was on our radar certainly in 2015. I think there's been a bit of a slow burn over the last decade, but as we'll hear about in the next session with Chris Chen speaking and Sarah Vasconcelos, advances in stem cell manufacturing and biofabrication, coupled with new insights into what are the barriers of translation of engineered tissues to the clinic, have really poised this field for the brink of translation. And so I think together this timeline represents a selection of some of the bigger trends within the past 10 years. And as Mansour mentioned, we asked our community to nominate the best translational work from the last decade. And impressively, every one of these themes was represented in the 20 nominations that we received in the translational science category. Our panel of 5 experts in translational cardiovascular science, Doug Lee, Tony Gramellini, and Paul Santerre from our center, and then Chris Chen and Mark Marcola from our scientific advisory panel, they whittled these down to the top 5, and which you have voted on. And we will, as Mansour mentioned later today, we'll introduce these finalists, talk about their work, and announce the winner, but I'm going to tease them a little bit here. Cameron Vendrig and et al. Were nominated for their 2016 seminal paper that demonstrated that GLP-1 receptor activation attenuated thrombosis, revealing an unrecognized mechanism that underlies the cardiovascular benefits of GLP-1 drugs and offering a new therapeutic avenue to reduce thrombotic risk. Dari et al. In their 2022 circulation paper presented practical methods to scalably manufacture mature iPSC cardiomyocytes and provided the first evidence that transplantation of more mature cardiomyocytes into injured hearts resulted in better outcomes. Hosseini et al. In their 2018 circulation paper critically evaluated the clinical validity of a gene panel test of 21 genes for Brugada syndrome, an arrhythmia syndrome with risk of sudden death. Of the 21 genes curated, only one met the threshold for definitive evidence of gene disease association. And this finding has led to changes in the genetic testing practices for patients with this condition. Nikoliev et al. In their 2018 New England Journal paper described a new paradigm regarding how somatic mutations impact cardiovascular disease. Specifically, they discovered that somatic activating mutations in the CRAS gene in the endothelium of the majority of patients with sporadic brain arterial venous malformations. Their work identified a therapeutic pathway which has since shown promise in clinical studies. And then finally, Zhao et al. In their 2019 Cell paper and prior work presented the BioWire heart-on-a-chip technology, which allows precision discovery and testing of drugs on human tissues with functional readouts. This award-winning technology has since been commercialized by Terra Biosystems and has been used by dozens of pharmas in their drug development programs. So I think you can appreciate not only the alignment of the themes of this work in the broader context I spoke about earlier and how the center is contributing to the global advancement of translational cardiovascular science, but also the range of ways in which our technologies and our ideas are being translated. So what does the next 10 years hold? Well, I think that's difficult to predict, but again, I think there's some themes, and these, I think, overlap very much with what Mansour was suggesting. The past decade saw the emergence of several platform technologies, and I think we'll see these continue to mature, be validated, and perhaps be applied in unanticipated ways. I mentioned several of these earlier. Certainly AI and machine learning will be ubiquitous across them. But in addition to what I've mentioned already, I think advances in device miniaturization, for example, micro robots to do non-invasive or minimally invasive surgery and biopsies will come to the forefront. And then convergence of advances in biofabrication with synthetic biology, I think will start to address some of the bottlenecks that have slowed translation of engineered heart tissues. I think convergence of themes will itself be a theme over the next decade, where we'll see, for example, precision medicine combined with advanced therapies to realize personalized, precise treatment, and Seema will speak more to this in a moment. The FDA's push for new alternative methods instead of animals for preclinical regulatory drug testing will drive, in the very short term, advances in organoids and organ-on-chip technologies, leveraging the past decade of advances in iPSCs and regenerative medicine. And finally, you'll hear much more about this later from Heather and from Todd. Perhaps the most important impact of digital health tools over the next decade will be using them to developing them and using them to advance new models of care that provide access to high quality heart failure care for everyone, everywhere. Now, of course, the risks to all of this is translational paths to take these ideas from the bench to the bedside to the clinic or to a company are not always obvious and not always easy. And we realized that very early on in the center. Often our brilliant scientists driving our brilliant innovations really have very little understanding on how to translate them. And so to address this, sorry, Conrad, your picture didn't make it up. So to address this, every project that is funded by the center is reviewed by our Translational and Commercialization Committee, where experienced entrepreneurs and business development experts advise our scientists and trainees on the translational opportunities and paths forwards for their ideas and technologies. To further support their scientists in their journey, TBEP launched the Entrepreneurship for Cardiovascular Health Opportunities program in 2018. This is a 12-month entrepreneurship training boot camp that equips scientists, engineers, and clinicians from across Canada with the skills and with the network to bridge the translational gap for their cardiovascular innovations. And over the past 7 years, over 180 entrepreneurs from almost 70 ventures across Canada have been trained by over 130 mentors representing multiple sectors. ECHO culminates with a pitch competition where we award the winning venture up to $250,000 in non-dilutive funding. Here are the winners from the past 7 years, and you can see they span many of the themes I mentioned earlier: precision therapeutics and diagnostics, wearables, stem cell therapy, and RNA-based therapeutics. These ventures are on the cutting edge. TBEP has invested almost $1.5 million to ignite these companies, which they've strategically leveraged to over $3 million in non-dilutive funding and over $20 million in investments to date. This is a over 16-fold return on our investment, and we're very proud of that and proud of our companies that have done that. So I'll end here and just want to promote this year's ECHO pitch competition, which takes place 2 weeks from today, where we'll have our 5 ventures from our 8th cohort pitching for the grand prize. These are the entrepreneurs that are going to lead the next decade of translation of cardiovascular science. And so I really encourage you to come out and see their ventures and their brilliant ideas.